Welcome back to Whence, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
All right, welcome back to the program. This is episode 247. This is our esoteric week. So, of course, we've got Frater O back on the program. And so, without any further ado, we'll just get into conversations with Frater O. We've got lots of stuff to talk about this week. We've had suggestions. We've had some interesting things go on. We've had things happen in the craft and news and such. All kinds of great stuff is happening. So, Frater O, how's it going?
It's going pretty well, man. How about yourself?
Not bad at all. Not bad at all. We asked this week, what are Frater O and RJ talking about on this Sunday night on Whence Came You? And we had some good responses, but before we get into that, I actually had, we had some Masonic news happen. So one of the things that came out just recently, of course, the official journal of the United Grand Lodge of England, Freemasonry Today. Probably one of the cooler Masonic publications. It is a website, it's a magazine. It is essentially the official magazine of UK Freemasonry's website, the website for the official magazine. And they had a great article. It was Millennial Masonry, How Those in Their 20s and 30s Are Changing the Craft. Now, I almost didn't click on this because the picture that is brought up when the article is shared is a picture from a video that was shared years ago. And so I almost just scrolled past it like, oh, I've already read that. But if you happen to see it, open it up and read it. Essentially, it talks about how Masons, specifically in the UK, are changing the craft, men who are in their 20s and 30s. And this is kind of in contrast. You know, we see and we hear a lot about membership drives and who we want in the lodge as far as guys who are coming in. And lodges and grand lodges are really focused on our younger guys, like these 20s and 30s guys. And actually, Hodep just pointed out the other day on his blog that men are looking into the craft who are baby boomers because they're retiring and they want something to do. And I thought that was kind of interesting. But specifically, this article is about how they're changing the craft, guys in their 20s and 30s. And they all have some really interesting ideas. They have a section that says Millennial Voices. A guy named John was saying that some of the lodges over there start at like 4 p.m. And he says that one of the things that would be better is later starting times. He said a 4 p.m. starting time is just too early for most salaried workers. Leave days are precious, and I don't like booking days off or half days off for masonry unless it's strictly necessary. I'd be the same way. I wouldn't want to do that. He talks about preserving the ritual. They want cheaper meals because it says this is a controversial one as many affluent young gentlemen are looking for some really fine dining. He said he kept skipping meals because he found it difficult to justify going out to these expensive restaurants with his small bank account. And another thing he says was taking it seriously. We see this all the time. There's, all kinds of horseplay and people are messing around and not taking the ritual seriously. So this guy, John, says that. This other guy says he's an investment manager, and he's the secretary of a London lodge where he's also a past master. And he says one thing that keeps popping up is the dress code and meeting times. He finds that interesting, at least. I'm not sure what he means by that, but I'm assuming he means that maybe they shouldn't dress up so much, or I'm not really sure. A guy named Richard says he thinks that the challenges with millennials is that they may see masonry like they see a young farmer's or conservative's future. It is for a certain type of wealthy, privately educated nerd. There are plenty of geeks out there that would enjoy Freemasonry but have a worldview opposite or at least different to young Freemasons, to young farmers that is, or conservative future. Then there are the festive boards. Socializing with people outside of your age group is often challenging for younger people. That's not to mention the expense of dining. So it's two guys talking about how expensive it is out there to go out and eat with these dinner clubs they may be fancying. But it was an interesting article. Lots of different tips and hints. And really, it seems like these guys are changing the craft for the better in that they're adding more social value They're being mindful of people's time, and they really want an emphasis on that ritual, which is something that a lot of guys here in the United States are doing too. They just want that emphasis on the ritual because nobody's taking it seriously. It's this thing that we're just going through the motions and not, we're memorizing the words, but we don't know what it means, and these guys are just doing it. What are your thoughts on all that?
This is a great topic to have a discussion on because it seems that there's this huge age gap when you get into Masonry, at least in the United States. And I think we can both consistently say in both coasts and the Midwest that we've been to, you can definitely see that. There's just the baby boomers, and then you have like the 30 and the 20-year-olds. And there's very few 40-year-olds that I've noticed in my experience. And not to say that all lodges are like that, but this is from personal experience. And my whole philosophy in life is if it's not going to be us, then who?
Right.
If we're not going to step up to the challenge, and if we're not going to make this better, then who's going to do it?
Yeah, it's a true story. You find us doing all kinds of things, and we're volunteering, and we're coming up with ideas, and we're trying to do all this stuff. And I think we kind of overkill sometimes because we're throwing so much at the lodges that we can do, and they shoot down 75% of it, and we're hoping that 25% sticks. I mean, it wasn't that uncommon that even 2 years ago I'd hear from brothers who say that they put up a lodge Facebook page and their lodge was like, no, take it down, you can't do that. And what is it now? Almost every lodge has a Facebook page. I think we're changing the fraternity for a better, for sure. Not that we're doing a better job than the previous generation did. It's that we're moving this fraternity forward in a motion that will be... The fraternity is acclimatizing to the generation rather than the generation acclimatizing to the lodge. I think that's important to an extent. I think the guys who are joining the lodge have a genuine interest in Freemasonry as it is. They don't want it to change, but they do want to be able to talk about it. They want to be able to post about it. They want to run a Facebook page. And they want all this because they want more people in. If you think about that, I just don't see another reason for anybody to, throw down on some guy for putting up a lodge Facebook page. Should a lodge have a public Facebook page? It's debatable. I think it's okay as long as what's going out there is positive stuff for the community so people know that they're there. And to allow gentlemen to direct message the lodge and ask about how to join, that kind of thing. But it is interesting. I mean, I talked about Facebook here, but there's so many other elements to it. Starting times and meeting dates and times, all that good stuff. I
mean, look on how you even created this show and where you came from and your idea to make the craft better and your involvement. And you did it yourself. No one told you to do it. You just picked it. You just started from scratch and you laid the first brick. And for all those younger Masons or even older Masons that are here, it always starts with laying that first brick and then focusing after laying that first brick to building the next one. And the next thing you know, you have a wall. And then you build the wall to be a foundation. What we've learned about in King Solomon's temple. It's that simple aspect. So for a lot of people that want to complain and people that want to say, oh, well, this is wrong or that, well, you have no right to complain about it unless you're doing something to fix it.
Hell yeah. And I will cheers you on that.
Yeah. So the most important thing is that making a difference in your lodge, and how can you do that? And I think we can channel that discussion now to steps. What have you done in your lodge, and what things have you seen that other brothers have told you, or have you seen through your travels that has been really effective on bringing a lodge back and bringing retention back or membership back, or bringing in that younger demographic that they're trying to reach?
Man, so much stuff. I mean, it's interesting in that it seems to be what I used to think was guys in their 20s and 30s were coming in and making these changes. And I thought maybe it was a millennial issue, a Homelander issue. But really, we've got some gentlemen who are joining lodges today who are mid to late 40s, who are coming in expecting the same thing you and I are, Frater. And they are seeking that out. But at the same time, they're also coming in with a wealth of experience of the world around them, coming into a lodge, and then seeing this lodge in this archaic position. They've got officers who aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Or I mean, I'm sure you know the modern brand new Mason who goes into a lodge and has studied his butt off and knows more about the craft than anybody who's been sitting in there for the last 20 years, because those guys came in, they read a little bit, and they just went out with fraternity and fellowship, and they've kept the lodge open, and they know the ritual. But you've got guys coming in who know more about the fraternity than a lot of guys who have been in there. So there's that's going on, and these guys are doing amazing things. I mean, these guys are taking on assistant secretary roles because they want to get a Facebook page going. They are taking on these roles because they want to make sure people are getting their dues cards on time. Right when you pay, that dues card should go out in the mail. You know, if you're a secretary and you wait 2 weeks to send a dues card, shame on you. You know, they want to share events. They want to write articles. They want to put together a newsletter. They want to make it what they thought it was. And they think it's those things because they read about how great we did it in the past. And so they want that, and they're bringing it back. I was in Santa Monica Palisades Lodge, Fratero, I believe you got your first degree there.
Yeah, Lodge 307.
Yeah, beautiful lodge. Love that lodge. One of the coolest buildings ever. They're doing some amazing things. I mean, the fellowship these guys basically had a great get-together before the degree. They had a great, like, kind of a party, and then afterwards, you know, we all went down to the street to a restaurant, and we hung out, and, you know, you were getting this extra stuff, like these little extra fellowship outside the lodge. And that's really important. So these guys were pushing that kind of stuff. You know,
Before we go off to another lodge,
yeah,
I want to add to, you know, Santa Monica. You know, they start at a very early phase as a candidate, and they establish that. So, for an example, when I moved there, I had to like kind of like hang around for a year before I could even be a member, because they want to make sure that you're serious and like, hey, listen, come by. We're going to go into lodge, but, you know, feel free to come by, join us for dinner. They want to get to know you. They want to get to, you know, it's a brotherhood. This is right. This is a serious fraternity, and we want to know if you're serious instead of come to the first degree and never return our phone calls.
Yeah.
So it's like they kind of try you out for the first year, and they invite you to all the events. They have an open door policy. They give you all the contact information of the worshipful master or past masters, and you know, if you want to use the library, or they invite you to the same events, the brotherhood events that, you know, the typical brothers could come to. No lodge functions because, again, it's for Masons only. But that sets the bar right there versus like becoming a degree factory. We're focusing on, oh, we have this many candidates we have to get through, and then usually the 80 percentile drop off. Usually halfway through, that we've noticed in the state of Massachusetts right now. So, you know, hats off to the boys there at the Santa Monica Palisades Lodge 307. They do a great system. They start that at a very early phase in the candidate process, and maybe some lodges can take some of this wisdom and knowledge and possibly apply it to some, you know, opportunities to improve on with candidate, you know, retention rates.
They do a great job. I was in Pleiades Lodge out in Westchester. You know, they do a great job as well with fellowship and getting together and putting on symposiums. And they really started something in the northern area of Illinois where they decided to do an annual symposium where they brought in guys who would do talks and stuff. I mean, they got some great big names. They had Robert Hurd come out. They had Anthony Mangelli come out. They had Charles Harper come out. And these guys all talked on some great topics. They've had Oscar Aline come out. They've had some really big names in the craft come out there, and they got some good pull. So, you know, kudos to those guys for starting that. Here in the Northeast, myself and the 2nd Northeast District Education Officer put together it's a symposium. It's the Traveling Northeast Area Symposium. So all a lodge has to do is say, we'll host. We get all the speakers. We put out all of the information. We flood everybody's inbox with emails and flyers about the event. And then the people show up, and we've got 40 or 50 people, 2 or 3 speakers, 2 hours of great talking and question and answers, and then we all go home. We've got great fellowship. You know, so there's the education aspect. There's lodges all over the place that are doing just amazing things. You know, we talked to Brother Wayne Greenlee and also Jack Aquilina who are in Australia, and they've got the social club for the younger members. In fact, I think once you're 45, you can't be older than 45, or it might be 55. I think it's 45 and under. But I mean, just these neat little programs that are really giving additional value and making the Masons feel like this is what I signed up for. What about you in your travels? I mean, I know you've seen some amazing things in DC.
Yeah, I've been very, very fortunate through my Masonic career to travel. And I urge every single brother that is listening here, if you haven't had the chance to get outside of your lodge and visit other lodges in different jurisdictions or different states, do it. Because it's the most amazing thing with this fraternity that you can cross all the boundaries of religions, politics, and business and break bread with a fellow man and call them brother and be accepted as a true brother and enjoy their company and meet amazing lasting relationships that will last lifetimes and transcend all these amazing boundaries. And so through my travels, regardless if it's business or even if it's a personal vacation, I always make sure to plan ahead and reach out to a local lodge and stop in and see the ritual or meet brothers, or even when we've gone to DC and to work on our project is to meet or touch base with local brethren. And it's so great. It's so amazing. I could talk for hours, let alone just on that. But it always seems like it always comes from the top down, from leadership, and it always comes straight down. And it's always funny to watch a lodge. How a lodge is run is the mere reflection of the consciousness of the worshipful master. On how the internals of that person's individual's mind works is just a mirror. It's unbelievable. And so if the lodge is usually in shambles, usually that person's life, I'm not saying everyone, granted there's always situations that arise and emergencies and unfortunate situations and extreme situations that happen, that sometimes things will fall apart for a lot of worshipful masters. But usually when there's good top-down leadership, that breeds down completely into all the chairs, and it breeds down from the chairs into the craft and then into the candidates. And it's like this intoxicating thing. And there's a handful of lodges that I've been fortunate enough to sit in where it's like that. And like we just mentioned is the Santa Monica Palisades Lodge 307. It's really significant. I have to say also too with your lodge when we sat down there in Illinois.
we hung out and we hung a TV.
Well, but the brotherhood, I mean, just the fact that it was just a rehearsal and you had 40 guys show up. Was it 30, 35, 40 guys for dinner? And
it was probably like 30 people.
Yeah, it was like 30 people just for a rehearsal. And there's only like really 7 speaking parts. So I found that pretty significant. Like it's just people wanted to be around. And 2 really in particular that stand out is St. John's Lodge in Boston. It's the oldest lodge in America, and they do it right. It's again that top down. It's very serious. They're there to do the work. It's about if one person has a problem, everyone has a problem. Everyone's there to be professional and do the best they possibly can. And it's a really intoxicating and thriving environment. Granted, I know we're talking mostly about Blue Lodge, but I've mentioned this in the past few shows in regards to the Scottish Rite. The House of the Temple, just north of the House of the Temple, the jurisdiction for the Scottish Rite, they have a unique valley where they meet weekly, and they always have speakers and just really active. There's speakers, there's a philosophical college, there's always something going on. And usually I've always found when lodges usually meet weekly or bi-weekly, and they have speakers, and it's just not a degree factory or it's just not reading of the minutes. They really have depth and breadth into the lodge in the meat and more than the meat and potatoes. It's really a thriving environment to be around, and regardless if it's brotherhood or fraternal nights or even a speaker.
Yeah, I always feel like if a lodge is making the effort, then it's always going to be doing at least okay. So I know we've talked a little bit about this probably for 20, 25 minutes, but I did want to also touch on some of the suggestions. We asked what are Fratero and RJ talking about this Sunday night at Whence Came You. The first thing was Mike Hambrecht said, how about explain the Beehive and how it fits in Freemasonry as a symbol or an emblem? Well, that beehive on the surface, of course, denotes kind of the establishment, the industrious Mason always working toward the common goal. What is that common good? In my own disassembly of the verbiage where that is actually talked about, and this may be a bit controversial, the way it is worded is that if you're not a Mason, if you're not an industrious person, you are not worthy of help or protection from a Mason. So the verbiage is very interesting that way. And it comes across as almost, if you are not an industrious person, you are a worthless drone in the hive of society. So they're really pushing the idea of utilizing these 7 liberal arts and sciences to contribute to the common good of the community, the planet, and humanity as a whole. And they make, it's pretty unapologetic, the way that verbiage is in there. And it's not exactly what I said, but it's pretty close. What are your thoughts on the Beehive?
Yeah, well, most people too. I would highly recommend going back and watching the Third Degree and listening to that lecture. It's pretty significant, and bees are important in life. It's quite an allegory if you can compare it to the human race. Like, we are a colony. We're on this globe flying through space. We're literally on this massive spaceship, and this is the only one we have. And we're one of the kind of the highest organisms, so that we know of in this dimension, on the food chain, and how important it is if we're going to be moving this rock forward in all kinds of aspects from technology to science to politics to whatever it may be, in all aspects of your journey. If you're not bettering yourself and you're not bettering the people around you, you're really an endless drone. You're not producing anything, no nectar for the hive. You're not. I think Albert Pike said it best. His quote that is found at the house of the temple, right by his coffin, is, "What we do for ourselves dies with us, and what we do for others remains immortal." I might be paraphrasing there, but
well, that's okay. We forgive you.
The beehive's really significant, and if you look at ancient Egypt, the bee was was really influential in their teachings as well. It can be found in a lot of the stone carvings. I think you can find it in Mackey's Encyclopedia. It was a symbol of the ordinate people because it says, Horpalo, of all the insects, the bee alone had a king. Hence, looking at the regular labor of the insects when they conjugated their hive.
So, another question that was asked by Brother Mike Hambrick is regarding the pillars, or the 5 orders of architecture, and what is that these 5 orders really allude to and mean to Freemasonry.
We could go on a whole episode on this topic. You want to table that, and we can do a whole.
Mike,
I think that'd be a great whole episode.
Let's talk about.
I know. Sorry. Go ahead.
Let's talk about the 5 orders in architecture in 2 weeks. We'll make a promise, and we'll a loose promise. Don't instant message me and yell at me that we didn't do it. We'll try. So next week
we'll get there. We are trying to be responsible adults, and we have families and responsibilities.
I'm not allowed to talk about architecture. So next week we'll have another episode dealing with historical or a possible paper, some Midnight Freemason stuff, and the week after that, Mike, we'll talk a little bit about, about the 5 orders of architecture, and we'll talk a little bit about what they could possibly allude to in relation to esoterica and some philosophical ideas.
Hats off to Brother Paul Nevins. He's a brother in my current lodge, and he took me aside for the show and goes, "Hey, I know you guys mentioned to..."
Wait a minute. Somebody figured out your identity?
There's very few people that are in the inner sanctum or the sanctorum sanctorum of the Illuminati side order that we have. Clearly, that's just sarcasm. Sorry, conspiracy theorists. But he showed me notes on his phone, and he had 44 topics on I believe I might have sent them to you. And he had no way to send them to me because he had them in his show notes or his Apple Notes. So I had to take we screenshotted them, and he sent them to me. But there are some really good ones, and there's so many. There's 44. I mean, would you want to chip away at some of those, or do you want to do that in another episode?
Let's see. Fredero is actually actively sending me these topics as we're recording here of this guy's phone who had some great ideas about topics for the show. I'd like to just kind of read a bunch of them, and maybe we can address a few points as we go along. DeMolay and Rainbow Girls. Not going to touch that ever. Mostly, I don't think I would want to touch that subject because we did do an episode on DeMolay quite a while back. I've never done a Rainbow Girls episode or like a Job's Daughter episode. I find that, and I don't mean this in any disrespect to any of the orders, and I might make some gentlemen not be crazy with the show. Maybe you're a long-time listener, and I'm going to say something right now that you might not really like, and you might find it very offensive. But I don't particularly find Freemasonry outside of the affiliation in the outside orders. So in DeMolay, Rainbow, Job's Daughters, Shriners, I don't necessarily find anything Masonic about those orders. I find that they're great and they do amazing things, and their organizations linked to Freemasonry. I don't necessarily find Freemasonry in them outside of, being sponsored. Even the Shrine, that there's several states where you don't even have to be a Mason to be a Shriner anymore. So that's just kind of my take on that. I do apologize if I upset you. He says, the Simpsons parody of Freemasonry. So the Stonecutters episode, I have heard of. I've never seen it.
What? You've never seen the Stonecutter? Dude, let's pause the recording. You need to go watch this, and we need to talk about this.
So maybe that's something that we'll have to talk about after I watch it.
Okay.
I just don't catch. I love cartoons, but I just never got into The Simpsons. When to or not to break a vow, concealing a brother's Mason's secret. Those left to my own discretion. That's a great topic.
That is a very good
When is it appropriate to break a vow, concealing a Mason's secret? Now, of course, there are bros out there right now going, never, murder and treason accepted, right? But this comes in an age also where the penalties are, we have these crazy penalties, but they're also called, in some states, they remove the ancient penalties and they just say, those don't actually mean those things, and they got to change things up. And so if they're going to change one part of the ritual and put less emphasis on it, what is the real emphasis here on concealing a brother master Mason's secret? When would you break that vow of silence? For me, I think this is a good example. This has not ever happened to me, but let's pretend a Freemason has a sister and her husband is also a Mason, and you sit and lodge with this guy. And what if he's cheating on his wife, and you know about it as a Freemason brother to brother, and he expects you not to say anything, but it's your sister? I would totally rat my brother out.
Well, yeah, if what they're doing is, and they're not squaring their work, if they're not using the working tools, and they're not keeping everything within due bounds, then without a doubt.
There you go. There's a little bit of a taste of that. Another topic was fundraising for the lodge. Fundraising for the lodge is always something, it's a worthwhile venture. I have a little bit of an issue when lodges fundraise for Freemasonry, when they're appealing to the general public and they're asking for money to keep their lodge open. I'm not sure that works out. It happens. I'm not sure if I agree with that or not. I think when a lodge looks for fundraising within the fraternity, for instance, Brothers Blend Coffee, how they fundraise through a Masonic channel, and they do a cool product, and they're upfront that this is to support the lodge, the charities, maintenance of that lodge.
And it's great coffee too.
It sure is. While we're at it, www.brothersblendcoffee.com. It is
well, RJ, I'm glad you brought that up because I just love my Brothers Blend Coffee.
So, let's see, General Masonic Trivia. I'll have some great news on that probably October-ish. Balancing family, work, and lodge. Wow. There is no balance.
Well, we're taught in the entered apprentice degree on the unique working tool that's presented and the effectiveness of it. And
Yeah. Your 24-inch gauge, right? Your 24-inch gauge. My own personal experience is that there is no work-life balance. There is no family-work lodge balance. There are choices you make, and there are consequences that you have for making those choices. There are times when I have done things for the lodge, and I was not at home with my family. There are times when I was with my family and I should have been at lodge. People will say, well, you can't say that you should have been at lodge if you were with your family. Yes, I can. In my view, this whole balance, family, work, lodge thing, I think, personally, because I take this fraternity very seriously, if you are going to be a primary officer of your lodge, right, a senior or junior warden or a worshipful master, that family first thing goes bye-bye. You have signed up to run a lodge and to run a business, essentially, for that year, for that 2 years, and you have cleared this with your family, and you have said to them at this point, within the construct of this primary officer, executive officer role that you've taken on, this is a second job. This is not where you're a steward, where it doesn't matter if you show up or not. This is the big boy chair, and you need to treat it that way. My own opinion, at that point, like I said, family first is not applicable if you are a senior officer in your lodge. What are your thoughts on that?
You really nailed it about causality and cause and effect, and finding that even balance that ebbs and flows, and that's just life. Just the tides go back and forth, and you kind of have to overindulge or jump in too much to find out your even balance. And if you're doing too little, push a little bit harder to find that balance, and try not to burn yourself out, because case in point, like when I became a Mason, I was rah, and then I just burnt myself out.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to do, because there's just so much and so many orders and so much to do, and next thing you know, you can be taking on all these loads and not be, and just be disenchanted very, very, very fast. So it's you have to, for me, it was like to jump in both feet, then find what worked. And with work and family, that's another struggle too. But going back to the entered apprentice degree, and usually with any one of these situations, you can always usually find a working tool that's been presented in Masonry just to apply. Granted, it's easier said than done, but any hard work always is. And if it's hard work, it's definitely worth doing.
I would totally agree with that. Absolutely. Something my dad said for a long time to me was always, the right thing is never the easy thing. The good stuff is never easy to accomplish. So right on point. Yeah,
exactly. We're just going back to the Ashlar system. I mean, do you want to put shoddy work on your foundation and each stone that you're laying, each brick that you're focusing on? Or are you going to build that brick, the best possible brick that you're going to lay down?
Right.
Brick by brick.
It goes back to a chain is only as strong as the weakest link. Well, that wall is the same way. If you're putting shoddy bricks, it's going to collapse. Lodges of instruction. We do lodges of instruction up here fairly often. It revolves from lodge to lodge, and it focuses on ritual instruction. Do you guys have lodges of instruction out there?
Yeah, there's been a lot of changes in Massachusetts. It just seems there's been a lot of key learnings, so to speak, and we have them, nor do I care to comment on them due to political reasons.
Yeah, I can definitely respect that. Lodges of research. Lodges of research are really cool. My only issue with them is that they produce quarterly material or yearly material and not nearly enough research. And many times lodges of research are just not run the best. I think the best lodge of research, hands down, in the United States is the California Masonic Lodge of Research. They've done it right with their online library and all their materials.
Remembering our duties to widows, elderly Masons, and etc. This is a great topic that he brought up, and it tends to fall pretty short in a lot of lodges I've been to.
Definitely.
And I could speak on behalf of lodge and Massachusetts, is that we only do one event. I wish we did more. Maybe that will change if I do find my way to the east. And it's sad. And we have a lot of these older Masons that are just, unfortunately, they can't make it to lodge because they can't see, they can't drive, or they
They can't read the lodge notice because their eyesights are going, and or even there's plenty of widows that we just kind of forget about. And in Massachusetts, we have a wonderful facility called the Outlook Facility. It's just for retirees, and we spend a lot of time lodge up there. We do one time each year. We go up and do a bingo day. Personally, I volunteer my time up there monthly. I go up and just walk around and say hi and sit down and talk with people. Because just if you're a younger Mason, the effect you have on people is the greatest currency you can ever receive.
Agreed.
Hands down.
Yeah.
And if you can go back and go to an old folks home that's involved with Masonry, or if you know a brother that's older that doesn't come by the lodge, spend some time with them, because that goes a long way. What about switching it over to you, remembering our duties to widows and elderly Masons? What's your thoughts?
Becoming secretary of my lodge, I have this duty, of course, of sending out dues notices. I have sent out dues notices, and I have received borderline scoldings. How dare you send me a secondary dues notice? I've been a member for so many years. I'm a past master, and I'm a very direct person, and my response is usually, well, then you know how important it is to pay your dues on time. But there are circumstances where I have sad duties to perform. I will receive notifications that, sorry, we didn't realize this was a secondary notice, and we thought you guys have heard, but so-and-so passed away. Oh, man. And this is how I hear about it. I hear about it because I had to send him a dues notice. It's not because we had regular contact with the gentleman and a member of our lodge came to me and said, hey, so-and-so passed away. It's because nobody's made any contact with this guy for probably 10 years, and the first time somebody sends a secondary dues notice or a final dues notice that's certified letter, his family opens it up and says he passed away 4 years ago. Well, why didn't we know about it then? So we weren't being real good stewards, I don't think, in that respect. The widows, there's a lodge in my district who every Christmas delivers tins of cookies to every single widow on their rolls. Just how cool is that?
I forgot to mention too, lodge, we do the same thing where we have a big day. We get together, we spend a fortune on baskets. We assemble our own baskets and we deliver them to the retirees and widows.
And that's so cool. We don't at Waukegan, historically, I can't speak for the past 10 years ago, but in the last 10 years, I've not seen much go on. We had a widows/ladies appreciation dinner my first year as a Mason, and the attendees were just my wife. And after that, we had another one, and nobody showed. So we just had limited success, and I think guys just gave up. But we're making a real effort now. Myself as a secretary, and I think just having kind of that new revitalization going in. We're sending out Masonic anniversary cards and things, and I'm getting these fantastic notes back. Fantastic, because the guys really pour some feeling into these notes that are coming back that they want to share with the lodge. But many times I read these notes and they're heartbreaking. So we do need to remember our duties to our widows and elderly Masons, and you should even say widowers. Dealing with negativity in the lodge or with people who default to saying something can't be done.
That's not the way we've done it.
All right, I'm going to quote a brother who says this all the time. So write this down. It goes something like this. If we always do what we've always done, we'll always get what we always got. What that means is just do it. Change, do something new. To say something can't be done is inherently wrong. Flying couldn't be done. Making cell phone calls couldn't be done. You name it. Things can be done. And I think being resistant to change and being negative is actually the most un-Masonic thing ever.
Well, Confucius said it best. He who said he can or he who said he can't is both usually right.
Right, yeah. Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right both ways, right?
Yeah.
Are we too restrictive on who we allow to join or too open to just anyone? I'd say the latter. I think we are just too open.
Right now, especially.
Yeah. There's that Northern Jurisdiction survey that went out had a question in there that was pretty open to Masonry in general. And it said, why do you think the fraternity is losing members or is not taking enough members in or people aren't joining or something to that effect? And the question is phrased in such a weird way. People probably don't even think about it, but the issue is such, right? I mean, Freemasonry membership numbers were never supposed to be as high as they were, yet we're measuring today's numbers against those numbers like that was the norm. So they're using like the biggest, the 6 million Mason number as the baseline, as what was normal. And that has never been the normal, ever. And so it appears to these gentlemen, because you're looking at it that way, and we've built an infrastructure that requires 6 million members to sustain itself, and now it is not sustaining itself because we don't have 6 million members. They're creating this atmosphere of desperation that it just reeks of desperation. This let anybody in. Progression through the degrees is super easy. They're taking the special out of it. To guard the West Gate is our mission, guys. To make sure that we are being restrictive. Like it or not, we are the most exclusive. Well, we used to be the most exclusive.
Oldest, though.
We are definitely the oldest. I just don't think that these people concerned with the numbers are concerned with the numbers to preserve the legacy of the governing body. But the issue is that governing body wouldn't necessarily exist in the capacity it does today if we had maintained membership numbers as they were, which is the norm, which is probably a little less than 1 million nationwide. If you look at percentage of active Masons, we'll say the 10% of all Masons in the United States, and then if you look at how many Masons make up a pretty active lodge, like 20 to 30 active members who show up, and you kind of do the math, you come up with saying that the entirety of the United States should only have about 400 lodges. But there's like 400 lodges in a state sometimes. I think we are just too open.
Yeah, I don't want to sound elitist. However, I'm going to sound elitist. There's no way around it. It's just, we definitely need to cut back. And I get it. I understand a lot of lodges are desperate and they're hurting financially. And if that's the case, then sometimes you take hard looks at the lodge and look at combining with another lodge. And that happens quite often. But if we're producing shoddy work, and if we're producing shoddy Masons out there, only a reflection of that person if he's a Mason back on the craft,
right?
Back on the product that we're presenting, or what we can do to a person, or how that person can better themselves. So by just, let alone if you keep this repetitive cycle going forward, it's just going to diminish the craft.
Totally agree. Explore on what outsiders think of Masons and Freemasonry and why they have those views. Wow. What do outsiders think of Masons and Freemasonry? I was at a huge sales summit meeting for my company last year, probably 10 months ago. And we had this exercise where folks had to find somebody in the room. I mean, keep in mind there's 100 people in a room. We had to find somebody in this room who had over 1,000 Twitter followers and get their signature. Who do you think signed all those 100 people's paper? Me.
Gee.
Me. Of course, because of the show. We've got more than 1,000 followers, which is just great. But here's the issue is they said, oh, well, what do you tweet about? And I said, well, I tweet about Freemasonry. What's that? People are oblivious. We have gone so long without community interaction that it's not that we're remembered even as, oh, those charity guys, or oh, those whoever. It's, who are they? Period. They just don't know. If they do know, it's probably a handful. My grandfather was a Shriner. That's what they say.
Or National Treasure usually comes up too.
Yeah, National Treasure. Oh, you like Harvey Keitel with the ring. Is there a treasure? There sure is. I think they have those views just because we lack the community awareness. We have, through the influx of members, the over-influx of membership, we have diluted the craft quite a bit. This is not a social club, and I don't know why we treat it that way.
I agree with you completely, especially with the point on the fact that the law of diminishing returns
It's a law that we can never escape, unfortunately. And just like how the tide ebbs and flows, when something becomes too much, it balances itself back out. And we're in that tide right now, so to speak.
So we'll tackle one more before we end this one out. The value of good ritual. How to improve it. How to get it taken seriously in the lodge. Well, I can tell you one thing. It's not ever going to get taken seriously if you're farting in the prep room or if you're talking about goats. That's just not going to happen. You guys are turning it into... I get it. It's all in good fun, and it's funny. It really is. I'm a guy. I think crude jokes are funny. When I was in the prep room and getting ready to walk in for my first degree, a dude totally ripped a big fart, and he started laughing. And I was like trying not to laugh because I didn't think I was supposed to. I was trying to maintain. And yeah, it was funny, and it was kind of an icebreaker. I was really nervous. But that's the point, is you should be nervous, and your nerves should be up a wall, because then you're taking in everything. Value of good ritual is invaluable. Robert Hurd talks about how so many lodges out there continually celebrate mediocrity, and it's horrible. Horrible, guys. If you get done with a degree, and if it was subpar, don't congratulate it. Don't clap. Don't tell people they did a good job. That's not being brotherly. You're being a pushover at that point. In my own mind, if something needs work, then it needs work. There was a great movie about a drummer and who was really pushed hard by his band leader. And he said the two worst, most harmful words in the English language are good job. And to an extent, you can call me a jerk or whatever, but to an extent, that's true. If you tell somebody good job when they did not do a good job, then I don't know that you're necessarily helping. So good ritual is huge. How do we improve it? Should we talk about those ritual schools that you wanted to talk about, Frater?
No comment.
So no comment on how to improve Mason, how to improve ritual.
No comment on the ritual schools. But to improve ritual, it was interesting that, the things you mentioned earlier happens all the time, the mediocrity and whatnot, and how Massachusetts took it pretty serious on how there's an edict now before the third degree, because it used to be really, really rough, and they used to people would do all kinds of stuff that I heard that I don't want to repeat. So we have an edict that has to be read before every single third degree in the state.
So we do the same.
Yeah, which is great. I think it sets the tone for everyone who's prevalent that knows that, hey, this is going to get very real, and this is for the candidate only, and not for you at all. You're just a visitor. You're just a guest watching this. If you're on the sidelines, or if you're a lodge officer, you're presenting some very valuable, important tools for that individual who's going to use those tools for the rest of their life, and you're going to leave a significant impression of what Masonry is for the rest of their lives. They can't go back. They can't retake the third degree or whatever degree. They have that. That's it. Right. That's it for the rest of their lives. So if you're not leaving a lasting impression, you're not doing a good job, and you need to focus on building a better lodge or aspect. If you're not, if you are, awesome, commendable. Keep doing it. Hopefully other traveling brothers can see that and bring it back to their lodge and build from it as well.
Yeah, and something I should mention too is, if you thought I was a little rough on my comments there, which I know I'll get some comments on, I'm not necessarily talking about the dude who forgets 10 words in his lecture. I don't think that's that big of a deal when to be good at ritual, to be on par or better, requires you to be able to adapt and to improvise when you forget lines. Just say the thing that's kind of like what it means and move on. Don't hang up on it.
Fake it until you make it.
Yep. Just go. And if there's a ritual vulture who comes to you after the degree and tells you that you did a horrible job, just know that you didn't. Because the candidate it's like we say, the candidate doesn't know if you mess a word up.
No, they have no clue. And that's the most important thing. When I give ritual, I always like to refer back to one book that has really significantly helped me, and that's The Art of Memory by Francis Yates. And it's a really rad book because it talks about memory of like building a house. And when you walk into the house, if you look a certain way, when you look through the house, you'll picture certain things in a room. And that's how you rebuild your subconscious. So you build these rooms inside this house and you walk through this house, and this is the ritual. So when I do ritual, or I focus on memorizing ritual or these long passages, it's this house that I'm building in my mind. It might sound silly, but I just start walking through that house in my mind as I'm giving ritual. So it's like, that's the way how I operate, and it's a great book. It's really helped me. Maybe it can help some brothers out there that are having some difficult time with memorization, or possibly ways to improve on their ritual. What techniques have you done with your Masonic career to improve or better your ritual?
For me, I've always had, I wouldn't call it a photogenic memory, but I can memorize things really, really fast. So I have that blessing. That said, I think my memory is good because I utilize techniques that just came natural. I always heard people talk about the memory palace or the mind palace, and that's something I've had ever since I was a kid. I've always had a place in my head where I visualize going through like a card catalog. When I'm trying to remember somebody's name, which rarely happens in the fact that I don't ever have to remember, I typically know your name right away. I'll never forget everybody I meet. In my head, I have name, personal information, what you look like, and personality traits. Those are all kind of in there on a card catalog. I very rarely will forget somebody's name if we've had some sort of interaction that lasted more than 20 minutes. And that is because I do use kind of a memory palace idea in my head. When I'm doing ritual, I quite literally memorize the words on the page and where they are on the page. So for instance, if I'm practicing a senior deacon's lecture, I'll get to a certain word and I'll stop and I'll look at the person who's following along and I'll say, "You're going to turn the page now." I know exactly where they are in the book because I'm almost reading it in my head. I've memorized the pages. So very similar to what you're talking about, building a house, only I think just my visualization is actually the text rather than kind of using the house as a visual template. But I'd love to throw a link to that book up on the show notes just so we have it for anybody who would be interested. So that's going to do it for this. We covered probably like 5 to 10 of the topics that Brother wrote to us about. We're going to continue answering these, kind of just point by point after we have another conversation in a couple weeks. So I hope you guys all come back and anything that we talked about, definitely take your notes. And if you want to yell at me about something, if you say, RJ, you're totally wrong, or Frater, I found what you said totally silly, or whatever it is, give us the criticisms. Definitely welcome the critiques, the thoughts, and anything you guys have to say about any of the topics that we talk about, because we want to continue the conversation, and we learn from you just as much as you might learn something that we talk about. So it's a big, what do you bring to the table? So I'm hoping we're bringing something to the table for you, and bring something back. Let us know what your thoughts are. Frater, any closing comments?
That was really well said.
All right, so with that, we'll talk to you in just a little while, Frater. Well, there you have it, a great conversation we had with Frater O about all things Masonic, essentially, not the Facebook group. I just want to thank everybody for continuing to listen and to be a 10%er, the kind of Mason who is active, who listens, who is up to speed, and who really takes an active bit in Freemasonry to make this craft even better than it's ever been. So thanks again. And with that, I will talk to all of you next week. Until then, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.